We are here between you and lunch. I'd like to invite Ankita Patil Thakre to come join us. She is an advocate of sustainability. She's an elected Zilla Parishad official, third generation in this business, and passionate about sustainability. Please welcome. I'd like to invite Dr. Lakshmanan. He's a scientist working in the Australian sugar industry since 30 years with great success in crop yield improvement. And he's even shown when the crop is treated right, get yields of 300 tons per hectare. I'd like to invite Dr. Nandkumar, who is a director of the KJ Soma Institute of Applied Agriculture Research. He's going to deliver a lecture on behalf of Professor Larry Walker, who's based in Ithaca, New York, who couldn't come because he had to undertake a last-minute surgery. Dr. Nandkumar himself has been working on technological interventions to improve soil productivity and health. Thank you all for coming. Dr. Solomon, who advises ISMA on cane matters, I think he is here as well. Thank you, Dr. Solomon. Welcome. So very quickly, sir, please. Very quickly, I just introduce the topic and I'll hand over to our presenters. You know, this year we're talking about low levels of monsoons. And every week or every day I look at the dam levels as to what are the dam levels in Karnataka or Maharashtra to see where we are. One thing I think we don't do is look at the level of soil carbon in our soils or any other such parameters. And just as important it is to have water in our dams, it is important for us to know what is the status of macro or micronutrients in our soil. Subhash ji just now in the previous panel spoke about the transitions of energy from coal to oil to gas. If I work backward, we have been depleting gas, we've been depleting oil, we've been depleting coal. Before that, we were depleting forests, and we continue to deplete soil carbon. These are all carbon sources that we need to work on. My journey to see soil carbon was on the visit to a farm, a gentleman called Kalappa, near my sugar factory in northern Karnataka. And I saw that he was using very interesting methods of treating the soil using Panchagavya, Jivamrut, drip irrigation, and a lot of integrated facilities, and looking at fantastic soil productivity and a very rich soil. And that inspired us to look at how do we improve soil, not only on an experimental basis, and then across all the farmer networks we work. So this is why I really want to thank the Aditya Junjunwala, President ISMA, and the ISO for providing us a platform to talk about this. I think it's important because the carbon in the soil or the health of the soil ultimately is nutrition for us. We are also carbon and other nutrients, and it's also necessary for the energy transition that we have. So I will now hand it over to Dr. Lakshmanan. Please, sir, for your presentation.
Thank you. I'm very conscious about the time, so I'll try to get through the presentation as quickly as possible. And good day to everyone. Let me first thank the ISMA and ISO for inviting me to participate in this very important meeting in Indian sugar and biology context. I think over the last several sessions, one thing is very, very important, and practically all sessions cut through that core thing. It is the availability of the feedstock, availability of the material that is producing sugar and bioethanol is probably the biggest determinant. And everyone is wishing for more productivity, and in a more sustainable way. Now, what I'm going to do very quickly in this presentation, through a few slides showing you some of the hard realities, how we can lift, or what are the limits we can do in lifting the productivity of cane per unit area or a per product basis. The green one, all right. Which one? Oh, this one? Okay. So the feedstock supply is a very critical component. Probably is going to be very, very important going forward, especially if you really want to aim for the big numbers we talked about yesterday. Some of the hard realities of those associated with lifting the game involve not just only from a cane production perspective, but also from a policy perspective, from a sustainability perspective. We need to consider a multitude of factors into this one to find some solutions to increasing productivity. Now, the last part, I will connect how we can increase the productivity and what soil health is going to do to become a very important element of this equation. From a cane production perspective, I will skip this slide. Now, just let me take you through some of the historic trends of sugar production. We really enjoyed a very good past 60 years, continuously increasing the sugar production globally. Almost 315% increase in the last 60 over years when you combine all the production. What you need to look at the number of, the cane yield improvement over the same period is just about 40%. So most of the production we achieved is actually through expanding the area of production. That is what actually brought us to where we are now in terms of total production, which is not going to happen much in the future. The agricultural land availability is really quite low, and that option, if investors are considering, the possibility is quite low. Also, when you get into the details of these the numbers, most of these production increase actually happened in India and Brazil. Almost 80% of the area expansion happened between these two countries. And there are probably limits to further stress the land option to increase productivity. So the only way, if we really want to increase the cane output globally, is to increase yield output per unit area. Now, I just also put some of these numbers to show you how serious this issue is. We really need to look into increasing productivity. In the left panel, the bottom line is the sugarcane, just a 40% increase over the last 60 years. Whereas when you look at the other major crops like maize or soybean, it's almost reaching in the 200% increase over the same period of time. We are really lagging behind as a crop in increasing the productivity. And there are several reasons for this. I don't have time to go through all those things, but just one important thing is lack of competition. Unlike soybean or maize or wheat or rice or any of those grain, particularly in the grain industry, there is a lot of private investment, a lot of competition. And that drove the productivity part of those industries. Whereas sugarcane is still largely a government-supported industry in almost all the countries except in Brazil, where there is considerable injection of private investment happening now. Going to the next one. Now, if you look at the last 30 years of the data of historic production, what you will see is that practically there is no change in yield improvement in all the major sugar-producing countries. This is very concerning. Hardly any change. Even in the countries like Australia or United States, where they have a lot more technical capacity and ability to change the game, even there, nothing much happened. It's really, really staying safe. Now, given this historic data, is it indicating that are we really reaching the yield ceiling, yield plateau? And is that it? Is it going to change in the last 30 years? More than hundreds of varieties were released, but there was no improvement with all those things, except one case here in India. With the release of CO 235, the game changed. In subtropics particularly, it has really increased the cane productivity in subtropics. So that is a very big change happened here. But remember, that's a very rare event. It's not frequently occurs. And such things will happen in all agricultural industries. Occasionally, you do come across some varieties that is going to really lift the game. And that is what happened here too. And unfortunately, none of the varieties will last long. We did an analysis in Australia. The average lifespan of the variety of a single variety is about 6 to 80 years. By the time it will be gone, it will be either killed by a pest or a disease. It will be taken away, or some productivity issue will come in. So we can't expect such, the miracle varieties coming quite often and changing the game. Now, that is one important consideration as investors need to be aware of, that whether we can really lift the game in any significant way from a crop productivity perspective to make all the projections. Yesterday we were talking about 1 million going up or 5 million coming down or the other way, all those sort of things. And this is the cane yield scenario. Now, if you look at the sugar content situation, that is much worse than sugar yield. Just to give you an example here in the Australian sugar industry, practically from 1940s onwards, hardly much change in the content of the sugar of varieties released. Like again, nearly 200 varieties, more than 200 varieties were released over that period of time, but hasn't changed. So that's one critical consideration you've got to be bear in mind, especially when you make all the projections about the alcohol production in future, or sugar production in future. It has been extensively researched, but it is really hard to resolve that problem. Now, going down, however, then one may wonder, is that what it is? Is the yield ceiling? Is yield sealed and there is no more productivity increase? No, that is from the data. When you look at seriously the details of the data which we have on the productivity, that is not the case. There are some places where you see very high productivity, especially in some farms consistently, at least in Australia, you get around 200, 250 tons per hectare. And there are some examples here for CO 328, yielding up to 327 tons per hectare in some farms in Uttar Pradesh, and there are multiple varieties producing more than 250 tons per hectare in Australia and Maharashtra in certain farms. In China, ROC 22 yielded quite high, up to 199 tons per hectare. So these examples are telling that actually the varieties we have at the moment at our disposal actually has a very high potential for yield, but we are not able to get it expressed in the field to boost the output, the productivity. So, in other words, the conclusion is that it is probably not the varieties. The problem is holding back the productivity gain. It is probably the way how we grow those things, the cropping system and the components of the cropping systems possibly is limiting the productivity. Now, let me go through a couple of risk factors associated with what it is actually in the production system bringing these things down. As I told you earlier, most of the varieties, on an average, it is 5 to 6 years, so 6 to 8 years lifespan, and it is taken away by diseases. And if there are some serious diseases comes, the impact can be extremely negative, as seen in Australia with some of the incursions, the smut incursions occurred, some of all those dips. It came down from an average yield of 9,500 to 60, 65 average yield. And it took about 5 to 6 years or 5 to 8 years to get back to the normal range. So are we, as an industry perspective, we prepared to take such big dips? And this is going to happen. This is only a matter of time, and most of the industries will experience if it can happen in Australia. And the next example, and why it is happening, just to give you one reason why it is happening is, there are in almost 70% of the global production is by just 8 varieties. 3 varieties in Brazil, India 2 varieties, and China 2 varieties, and Thailand 1 variety. So just 8 varieties combined producing. It is a very disastrous thing from a biosecurity perspective. If some disease comes here for code 238, it will be a big problem. So one important learnings I can share with you from an Australian perspective is that they now made it it's a mandatory requirement. No variety can grow more than 25% for the whole acreage of the country at any given time. So something like that, kind of a genetic buffering system, had to be evolved in all these major producing countries to reduce the shock, to make the productivity reasonably even. Yeah. Next one, I think you heard a lot about that, the drought. This is an example in Thailand. It's becoming very frequent and very serious. Now the product in 2020 and 2021, the average yield came down to 46 or 47 tons per hectare. Now how can you accommodate that? And repeated incidents of these things will push the farmers away from sugarcane, and that's what happened in Australia, or in Thailand, and quite significantly happening in China too. Most of them are going towards fruit crops and other high-value crops. Another important consideration from a soil health and soil sustainability perspective is the amount of chemicals going into the soil. Effectively, you just take the case of two countries, we don't need to put this much of nitrogen fertilizer into the soil every 12 months. On an average in China, 500 kilograms per hectare, kilograms nitrogen going into every hectare. And Indian situation is not much behind either. So if you keep dumping so much of chemicals into the soil, you're just simply killing the soil. And how do you expect varieties do well and grow well and produce more and more? No, that is not going to happen. So some of these fundamentals are actually blocking the productivity gain in the industry, and that must be addressed. Fortunately, one of the previous speakers, not this session, the session before, was addressing how important, how to teach farmers to produce sugarcane in a more sustainable and healthy way. See, this, I just took some photos. This is now an uncommon scene in China. Most of the seedlings become yellowish for a certain period of time when it starts the crops. Now, how do we solve the problems? Definitely, we can further improve the variety situation. More genetic potential can be added to it. If we move towards we are moving more towards modern breeding systems with incorporating all the new technologies like phenotyping and genotyping technologies. Then there are options for GM and genome-edited sugarcane traits. I mean, the traits, I just listed some of those traits which is already successfully introduced into sugarcane, and many of them happened in Australia. We were the pioneers starting this area of work in sugarcane. That is a feasibility, but the regulatory things killed all those programs. Then another thing is constraining, really controlling the disease and pest through proper quarantine sessions. These are not actually existing in most countries, even in major producing countries. So just to sum it up with this one important thing to consider going forward is increasing more private injection of investment for breeding and other related research to come up with some breakthroughs and more innovations. That is really lagging behind in the sugar industry when you consider the grains. And one really good example I can tell you is the ISMA SBI venture happening. So things are moving along those lines here. And do everything possible to improve soil carbon. That is so critical, like Mr. Somaya said that. So with that, I will stop it here and move on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I would like to now welcome Dr. Nandkumar. He's going to present the presentation prepared by Dr. Larry Walker, who was supposed to fly here from the US. And unfortunately had a surgery just that on his way to the airport. He had to suddenly be hospitalized.
Good noon. Thank you, ISMA and ISO, for allowing me to represent Professor Larry and his presentation I'm going to present here. So here, as we are discussing since morning, so feedstock is very important for our biofuel and sugar industry. Productivity has to increase, so that we are talking about in last couple of speeches also. That's very important, and productivity is also going down. So reasons when we find out, so we have to work upon the how to address these problems. So the growth of industry is depending upon the expanding feedstock production, and which cannot be achieved without more land, and which cannot the land is not available for the cultivation. So hence we need to increase the productivity. So growth in the industry also hinges about creating new markets. Like we can see the energy for biofuels, lot of market is opening up. So we need to increase the production. So based on that, when you see, if we compare with the future of the sugar industry, and then sustainable yields, we are talking about it, and sustainable pricing, delivery of the products, new businesses models also to be set up. So if you all these compare with the soil and agriculture commodity, so when to increase the production, sustainable crop yields are very important, and then sustainable pricing for agriculture commodity also is important. And along with that, diversity of product and new market, health of soil is more important to increase the or enhance the productivity. So here robust rural economy also a part of it, so that sustainability in all terms will be having a more value. So what is then soil health? As we are talking more about how should be the soil health to be improved. So in morning, Mr. Sangeet was talking about, like, we are exploiting the complete earth, like for utilizing us in the benefit of human mankind to produce more and to industrialize and to utilize the resources for bioenergy as well as sugar. So here soil is very important base material for increasing for maintaining the productivity as well as for enhancing the productivity. So which is, if you talk in terms of technically to define the soil health, that is the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that solutions plants, that sustains plants, animals and human beings. So this is basic definition, and it is not necessary to go into very technical detail, but the characteristic of soil needs to be the dark in color and supports adequate levels of nutrients, which is very important. Although we put the nutrient, but it should be supporting for the uptaking. There has a good soil health that allows plant roots easily penetrate the soil volume, and then how sufficient porous surface is there to permit the nutrients to uptake by the plant. And then what are some of the living characteristics? Because soil health doesn't only have a nutritional factor, but apart from that, there are some living organisms which supports for growing the plants in a healthier way. So where decomposed organic matter is one of the very important factor. Apart from that, we should the soil should accommodate a very diversified population of organisms, which helps for like utilizing the nitrogens, phosphorus, and potassium. And the soil should also contain very high level of relatively fresh residues, which can help in uptake of the nutrients, and contain low levels of toxic, because nowadays whatever fertilizers we are using, so they are mostly supporting for the plant growth, but apart from that they are increasing also soil toxicity. So there also we need to focus. And what must feed the living soil? So this is a basic formula. Professor Larry wants to explain about how the CO2 is utilized from the atmosphere, and along with the water, when we get the photosynthetic activity, then it becomes a sugar. So that's what our industry is based upon it. However, apart from it is not only for the CO2, but there are other cycles also, like for the nitrogen also, phosphorus, potassium. These life chemistries are also there. So how they are being utilized, that is more important. And the biological size, we talk about microorganisms. So there is a cycle for that also. And there is requirement of carbohydrates, amino acids, as well as the oxygen and nitrogen is also required for building up a very, maintaining healthy microbes. And so this is all integrated, which supports for the good plant growth. So apart from, as we saw, nutrition, then microbial things, and apart from that, we can also go ahead with worms, beetles, and other organisms, which plays very important role in enhancing the productivity. So our carbon cycle, it's a very available carbon in the globe, we can see. So it's a circulation through different like channels, you can see. So as there is a theory of Albert Einstein, so energy cannot be created and cannot be destroyed. On that basis, if you see, all like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, everything has to be circulated in a very perfect form. How precisely we use, how judicially we use these energies, so that makes a good sense of like utilizing the nature's available resources. So here you can see, I don't want to explain again in detail. So there is a cycle, like from one farm to other farm, we are transferring the carbon, but there are two things. One is above soil and below soil, which these two things are very important. Above soil, of course, the sugarcane is itself is a carbon sequestering crop, but apart from that, soil carbon also needs to be very important. So here I just wanted to quote the example where we tested how it is going down. So almost you can see the 45% of the soil tested soil samples are having the low levels of carbon, which indicates that we have to again regenerate these soil carbons in different way to maintain the good health of the soil, which can be ultimately in enhancing the productivity. So here we can see the soil pH and other things are also important, that we farmers are now we are making aware, and other people also, like institutes, are also working on making awareness to the farmers to maintain pH also, and other parameters. Here if you see the nutrition, if you correlate, so nitrogen is becoming down, but again when we are putting more nitrogens, there are some impure forms are also there, which can create a soil health, it weakens the soil health, so that uptake will be less. We cannot only keep on going adding these nutrients for only increasing the yields, but we have to take care of the soil health for proper uptake and proper utilization of these nutrients. So then to understand and to manipulate, so there should be a good strategy to tackle these things. So we need to make awareness programs, so where it is very important to manage this complexity. To embrace a system, holistic approach is required, because nowadays all chemicals we are using, chemicals always again creating more problems. So that's why our soil health is becoming weak, as even we can see in other systems also, when we utilize more chemical based systems, so they are not the natural ones. So that's how now immediately we cannot convert everything to the natural system, but again we have to make a combination of efforts, like which can be initially as we are using chemical fertilizers, along with that we can use biologicals to enhance the things and to work more on a natural way. So use of advanced high throughput soil analytic sensors based systems. So when we test the soils, then accordingly we can manipulate the nutrition, which is very important. As recent talks we were talking, more nutrients are also harmful. So then we need to balance it. So then scientific data is required. So how much nutrients are less and which has to be added. Then develop data visualization and analytical capabilities to leverage the data and to understand the complexity. Acknowledge spectrum of the technology and possibilities, and recognize to our interventions of innovations which must be human-centric. So where human health as well as soil health are correlated, so hence we need to work on both the aspects. And the leverage of experiences of the diverse set of stakeholders. We need to recognize that no change of landscape is one of the concept. Likewise, we have to change our mindscape also due to to more improve the systems to use in a holistic approach. So acknowledge that communication to the continue education to all stakeholders, where we can incorporate these biologicals as well as natural way of farming and using biological applications. So accept that this age of the social media, then we need to co-design the approaches to identify how to intervene these innovative approaches and to industrial agriculture ecosystem to encouraging questioning and thinking of outside of the box, which is need of the day. So these are the few things. So where we addressing, this is one last slide I want to highlight how we are addressing this issue. So we have two different group of social things. One is like academic. We have almost 39,000 students in our university at Mumbai, and then we are working also with almost 18,000 farmers. So where our team is integrated to exchange the ideas and to improve the system for improving soil health, to increase biodiversity and to increase the carbon spectrum, increase the farm productivity, profitability and ecosystem also for the livelihood and upliftment of the economic benefits to the farmers. So this is it. In conclusion, the future success of the industry hinges on the ability of the regeneration of the soil and the community health also. This regeneration will require a systematically get handle the complex interactions to give rise to the soil and the community health. So our interventions and innovations for soil and community health must arise from the co-design processes that driven by the multidisciplinary and multi-institutional stakeholders. So we must be brave enough to imagine and to evolve new approaches to secure the need of the feedstock for our industrial activities. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
So we'll thank Larry Walker in the US, and we thank Dr. Nandakumar. So I think the whole idea was to have a wake-up call, because most of us are not aware of what is happening below the surface, and that's one reason. And I liked what he used, the word industrial agricultural ecosystem. Often we are looking at the four corners of our industrial ecosystem. We do buy cane from the farms, but it's also important, I think, what we do, as you say, below the surface. So Ankita, if I may ask you a question, why you yourself very much an advocate for sustainability. Why do you think this session is important or relevant?
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel that enhancing carbon sequestration is very, very important at this point of time. We all present here, all the stakeholders, we are strong advocates of climate change. We are all working towards reducing the greenhouse emissions with the progressive ethanol policy that is into play. Along with that, there is also a lot of innovation in agriculture in terms of the seed varieties that is being researched in a very big way. But along with that, I feel that this is one area which needs a lot of attention and a lot of research that needs to go into it, because I feel that inward integration is very, very important. And to put it across simply, I feel we need to go back to our roots. We have to go back into the soil and increasing the carbon content or carbon sequestration in the soil, which will help boost the agricultural productivity, which will help all of us to focus on the soil health. It, I think, is very, very important, because as we all know that rainfall is a very important factor when it comes to the cane crop, and along with that also the increasing yield. So yield is another very important factor we all have been speaking about in this conference for the past 2 days. But in order to improve the yield also, I feel the soil health proves to be a very, very important factor. So that's why I feel going back to the roots, going back to the soil, studying the health of the soil and working on improving it is a very, very important factor.
So I think she underscores that for climate change, we are talking about sometimes carbon capture and storage, what comes out of a chimney, but this is across the country. If you increase soil carbon from 0.5% to 1.5%, you're sequestering large amounts of carbon, combating climate change. And also by getting that there, you're securing your feedstock for the coming season. So thank you. Dr. Solomon, what would you like to contribute to this discussion?
This is a very good presentation we had. And the idea is to shift from sugarcane agriculture to bio-intensive sugarcane agriculture. Our institute has done, especially in India, a lot of work on this. And we have developed a lot of models, area-specific models, region-specific models, state-specific models, where these practices are followed. This is a holistic approach where we use different kind of approaches. It's right from using FYM, green manuring, vermicomposting, pressed mud, everything in an integrated manner. So the soil health is maintained, soil organic carbon is maintained, and we are trying to improve, as she has pointed out, that if we could improve it from 0.5 to 1%, it will be a great achievement. And to get the higher yield, this is a very important component. Soil health, where it matters, everything is grown in soil. So we have to take care of this physical, chemical, and biological health. So in future, if we have to take higher yield, because our farmers have proved progressive farmer yield is up to 250 to 300 tons per hectare. And we are now at around 82 or 83 tons per hectare. So there is a great scope to improve cane yield. And that is, soil health is very important. And I think if we take care of all these components, gradually we will cross 100 tons per hectare in maybe in next 2 or 3 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Lakshmanan, one point which you made, a quick question for you. You talked about GMOs. Do you think GMO and sustainability are at cross purposes? Do you think they go together, or there is a perception they go against each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. GMO option, I don't know. Personally, I don't think that is the right way to go, considering there are a lot of other easy options in front of us. Particularly, basically cleaning up the current way of farming system, that will do a real big change. That's my view.
Yeah.
The other one is very expensive and very technically demanding and very regulatory.
No, thank you. Very, very clear and quick answer. And my question to Dr. Nandkumar. Dr. Nandkumar, so Dr. Lakshman has talked about how you can go to 300 tons per hectare, and he's done research in China and has interventions in Australia. Do you think this is possible here in the Indian environment? We know we have 100 ton per acre clubs of some farmers, but do you think that, because this will completely alter the story that my president, Mr. Junjunwala, mentioned, because that's not factoring into our, availability of biofuels for the future. If you go from 80 tons per hectare to 200 tons per hectare, you've got 2.5 times the resource. So is it possible?
Theoretically, it is possible, but there are many factors apart from the soil carbon also, like varieties and climate, lot of other things are influencing. But in a smaller scale, it is quite possible. So already there are some examples where we can even go up to 250 tons per hectare. That means 100 tons per acre. There are good examples are available. But making all the farmers to practice these things like crop rotation, trash mulching, and utilization of the biofertilizers in a very judicial way, and making other practices judicially and effectively, there is quite possibility. But even if we can increase 10% of the farmers who can adapt these technologies, then our productivity from 6 million hectares, what we are getting now, 85 tons, if it increased by even 50 tons, then it would be great. There is a chance, but to cover up how they adapt and how we can make them to adopt these technologies with the intervention of new technologies like monitoring the crops through digital systems and making communications with them to make them to work with efficiently, then quite possibilities are there. We can even double our productivity in maybe 5 to 10 years.
So this is music to our ears, old knowledge, new technologies, interventions with a community level, small farms to achieve big results. It's lunchtime for us. I think we all need some food and sugar in our system. So I will not take too much more time. I would really like to thank our panelists and our speakers. I think the whole idea was to, wake ourselves up to the dangers of not looking at it and the advantages and opportunity in actually looking at it. So thank you very much.